Hello, everybody. Welcome to Take the Black Live, the show on the internet where we talk about all things sci-fi, fantasy, movies, TVs, books, robots, dragons, horses, spaceships, and so forth. My name is Dan Selcke, and I'm the editor of winteriscoming.net. I'm here with conquering, returning hero Daniel Roman, also the editor of winteriscoming.net. Hello,
Hello.
Martha. Hello, fantasy fan. Good to see everybody. And this is, I love saying this, a big one, an important one, because we have some fun news. Daniel, let's dive right into it. You've been gone the past 2 weeks.
I have.
Where have you been, and what were you doing?
So I've been it's great to be back, first of all. Nice to see you guys in the chat. Nice to see you here, Dan. I was in Scotland these past few weeks. I went over there for Glasgow Worldcon, which is Worldcon, if you don't know, is a big science fiction and fantasy writing convention. It happens every year in a different city. This year it was in Glasgow, and I went to it. And while I was there, I had the honor and the privilege of interviewing George R.R. Martin. So I did meet him while I was there, and we did have a chance to talk about his writing career, some of his non-Westeros works, general views on fandom, and all that kind of stuff. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful to meet him. So that is JP. Who's that? Some guy might have written a book or two you've maybe heard of. So that is what I've been up to the past few weeks. Not the whole time the past few weeks, but that happened during those past few weeks while I was away. So yeah,
it was a vacation, but you ended up working anyway, which we thank you for very, very much.
What a joke. Yeah, it definitely did not feel like it's funny because I planned it as a vacation, but then my flights out got delayed. So this is a fun story. So my flight out, it got delayed 5 times. I had to overnight.
Really?
I missed a whole day that I was supposed to be there early. So I had to overnight in Charlotte because of the hurricane that was happening. I got there. I got to my hotel in Glasgow about 3 hours before I was supposed to speak to Martin, running on like an hour of sleep.
Way.
So I got there, I jotted down my notes, I turned right back around and went out to speak with him and meet his minions and such, which was all really wonderful. And then after I got sick, after I got
that's right.
Yeah, so it was mostly work, but very, very enjoyable work. That involved a lot of drinking as well, because writers apparently go really hard at conventions. I went to bed very late every night. So that was definitely, but interviewing Martin was obviously the highlight. I had a chance to see his short films as well, the Howard Waldrop short films he's been producing.
Cool.
I got invited back to a screening of those, and they were also very wonderful. So yeah, that'll be coming out someday soon. We don't know exactly when yet. I'm working on transcribing all my notes and stuff. It was a not on camera interview. We met at a bar and just kind of talked about his career and experience. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Can I ask you this? I'll ask you one question, because like Daniel says, we're going to get the interview out in the next, week and change, 2 weeks. We'll see. We're going to take our time with it. So we don't have it with us right now. But can I ask you, a little tease, what did he drink? What did the creator of Game of Thrones drink?
I feel like this is fair for me to say, because I realized when I went back and listened to my recording of recording the audio, that it's even on there. I had his drink order on the record. He even made a joke about it during the interview, which is he was just having pineapple juice. He was not drinking. He was being very respectable. But yeah, I think he was working. He needed to keep his thoughts together. I did not drink during the interview either.
I mean, you were also like 3
keep
hours
it above
out.
board. Yes.
I'm not surprised with lots of drinking. There is a time and a place for everything.
Yes.
When you're young, it's college. And when you're an adult, it's conventions. Every convention I've been to for work, otherwise, after it's over, people just go kind of hog wild into the bars and the hotel bars. It's a little break from life almost when you go to a convention. But that's
Totally.
great, Daniel. I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to seeing that. I'm sure everyone else is. How exciting. Very cool. What a great
Yeah.
exclusive that Winter is Coming has here, coming out in the near future.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Worldcon's a big deal. Like you said, it's this major science fiction fantasy convention. What else did
Hmm.
you see there? How did it go? Because I know that you're pretty invested in Worldcon and the Hugos and all the rigmarole surrounding this prestigious award ceremony.
I am. Yeah. I mean, my whole background before getting into working here at WIC was writing fiction and stuff like that. So I'm very invested in kind of the whole community aspect of Worldcon and all that stuff. And it was a really, really good convention. I think Worldcon and especially the Hugos, they've had some rockier times in recent years. So again, for those who may not know, Worldcon is where the Hugo Awards are given out. They're voted on by like the people who attend and support this convention. And last year they had a big controversy where it took place in China for the first time, and the people running the awards, the Westerners running the awards, preemptively censored a bunch of stuff they thought might upset the Chinese government. They made a bunch of really bad calls with that. It was a whole thing. It got like national news coverage in the US. Definitely a black mark on the Hugo history, which is a shame because the Chinese fans were all really excited to have it there. Glasgow went out pretty much without events aside from just it was a really good time. There were no big snafus or controversies or anything like that. The Hugos were really wonderful. Shirin, a few people who were censored last year won awards this year. So Shirin J. Chow, who wrote Iron Widow last year, was her final year to win the Astounding Award, and they actually extended her eligibility this year, and she did win it. That's like the award for best new writer type thing. And yeah, some other notable things from that: video games, best video game or interactive work is now a permanent category. And it felt like that was not just film categories are also at the Hugos, and the people who accept the film things rarely show up. like the last the Last of Us won best dramatic presentation short form for long time, which is the Bill and Frank episode. Obviously
best episode of the season. Easily.
It was definitely one of the top ones. I will not dispute it. But I think certainly one of the most beloved episodes of the season. But obviously Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, they were not there. They're actually wrapping up shooting, it seems like, on The Last of Us season 2, so they're busy. But for Baldur's Gate 3 won best video game or interactive work this year, and like there was a lot of panels and stuff like that. There was a lot of programming around Baldur's Gate, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Samantha Bayart, who plays Karlach, was also there. She did a bunch of stuff at the convention. A bunch of the writers were there from the game. So it feels like the Hugos are recognizing game writing, and not just video games, but also tabletop RPGs are part of this new category. So being more inclusive to that in a way that I think is really good and like forward thinking. So yeah, the Hugos were excellent. A lot of people use their time on stage to call kind of attention to real world events like what's going on in Palestine and the race riots in the UK, which was also really powerful, I think, to see the community kind of being steered toward putting as much focus on the real world as on the fictional stories that we all love so much. And yeah, the last one I'll mention is that Emily Tesh won Best Novel for her dystopian sci-fi Some Desperate Glory. And
Desperate Glory.
Yeah, and her speech was just excellent. It's the kind of thing I could see people like referring to years from now. So yeah, the Hugo Awards were great. The con in general was great. It was a lot of very good vibes. A lot of people meeting who know each other online, but a lot of us were meeting in the first time
Always
in person.
That.
Yeah, that was just wonderful. So it was an all around great experience, and I'm really grateful to have gone. So I miss it already. I'm already eyeing. It's in Seattle next year. I'm already eyeing the calendar. So
totally doable.
Yeah. Much easier than Glasgow for
Yeah.
me, for sure.
I have to relay Martha's question. In Scotland, did you see any Outlanders? Which I will just kind of break down to any people in kilts at all.
I certainly did see people in kilts. Yes.
Wait, for real?
Well, yeah, yes, real kilts. They wear them. That's a thing that is in Scotland. Not a lot. I won't say that there were
Okay.
kilts everywhere, but especially when I was out in, I did spend a little bit of time in Edinburgh, mostly quarantined, but I did see a little bit of Edinburgh on the way to and from the quarantine, and did see some people in kilts. Fringe festivals going on in Edinburgh right now, or it
Right.
is. I think it's all this month. So it was a very festive air there. And yeah, I did wonder at one point, how many people in Scotland right now are watching Outlander? Like, there must be tourists who are here watching it. You could get the train, up to Inverness, which is where the Stone Circle is that they go through and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I did not do a lot of Outlander sightseeing, unfortunately, because I just didn't have the time.
You were busy or you were sick. Yeah,
Exactly, one or the other. Hi there, Julie. Thanks for the welcome back. But yeah, so it was a really good trip. It was great to meet a lot of authors who I've known for a while, and obviously, speaking to Martin was wonderful. Very cool hearing his takes on stuff, and kind of hearing about some of the behind the scenes with a lot of this work that he does, because he's a very busy guy. He's doing a lot of things, especially for someone who's in their mid 70s. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in the where is the winds of winter of it all enough that it's easy to forget, he's actually juggling like 50 things at any given time, this dude.
He loves to juggle that, man. But yeah, Julie, if you just came on, Daniel Roman interviewed George R.R. Martin. We're going to get that interview to folk in the near future. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And a couple of you were saying that you're having trouble with the Facebook thing. Just in case, we do have a YouTube stream over there if you want to hop on over. Because this is fun to talk about. Sometimes Facebook messes up. Not all the time. Well, Daniel, I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're George R.R. Martin. Excited to hear more about that. And in honor of you talking to George R.R. Martin, author of A Song of Ice and Fire, author of Fire and Blood, creator of Game of Thrones, Confess the Dragon, I thought we'd make this show a bit of a George R.R. Martin fest, because Grandpa's at it again. He's out giving some interviews, giving his opinions, and they're always good for a think. George R.R. Martin has some history at the Hugos.
Yes,
I believe he presented a couple of years ago. Yes, I guess some history.
A lot of history. He's been going since the 70s, and we did talk about his whole history with the Hugos and the convention and stuff like that.
Did you touch on the time he hosted and he was at the center of one of these controversies that seems to rock the Hugos at least every other year?
We did not, because I wanted to ask him about some happy Hugo memories rather than the controversy, but also just because time, we talked a lot about the Hugos. So at some point I had to steer it towards some of his other works, but yeah, no, we didn't talk about the controversies, but yes, that was a thing that happened.
I think it's interesting because his controversy, I forget what year it was, but he was the Toastmaster. I'm sure Daniel's on it.
Yep.
Kind of giving this big speech, and he was dinged for focusing too much on the kind of past of sci-fi. You were talking about how all these people gave speeches about contemporary culture, kind of addressing common issues, and he was more about here's these problematic, mostly dead authors who contributed to this kind of a tradition that we're continuing today, and folk didn't really take kindly to the tone. Yeah. There is a bit of a split. What I understand, you know a lot better than I do, obviously, at the Hugos.
No, that's
between
fair.
Some of the younger people who are more focused on the, use your platform to do good, and some of the maybe a bit older ones who are more, I don't know, not as focused on that part of it. And George R.R. Martin recently gave a talk at the Oxford Writers' House where he was asked this question. He was asked quite a lot of questions and gave quite a lot of good, spicy, fun answers. One of them was, what do you think is the role of sci-fi and fantasy in commenting on contemporary culture, on kind of addressing modern right now issues? And his answer was basically, That's fun if you do it. It's not really my thing. He said, I think fantasy is bigger than that. It doesn't have to comment on what's going on this week or this year, even this century. It doesn't have to comment on what's going on this. Oh, I understand. Fantasy is about universal human truth, is about love and life and faith or doubt or greed and lust. All these basic human things that are different but still the same, whether it's the Middle Ages, 2024, or ancient Rome. And those are the kind of things that I like to talk about more. And I know that you didn't get into like the dice. It's not dicey. I don't think there's anything dicey here. I think it's a perspective. I do think that's interesting. I do think how it's anthropologically interesting, how there is this sort of divide between a bit of an old guard and a new guard. And it feels like the new guard feel more of an obligation to talk about issues of modern concern. Maybe the older guard isn't as into it. Would you say that's accurate?
I think there's probably some element of truth to that, but not not wholly either, because there are members of, to use your term, the old guard who were always more about talking about those kinds of things too. Like Ursula Le Guin is someone who comes to mind as a person who was always very prescient with talking about that kind of stuff. And I think, that point that Martin made, it's not that it's not worth talking about. It's just that's not really what he does.
Exactly.
And I think that is pretty fair, honestly. I think especially sci-fi writers are often better at having their thumb on the pulse of current events and how these things play in together. And like Martin has written sci-fi plenty, but that's just not the kind of thing he ever did. And he talked about, I think elsewhere in that same interview, Tolkien, and how Tolkien was the same. Like Tolkien used to get annoyed when people said, he's just allegorying for World War I and World War II. Sauron is Hitler, this and this. And Tolkien would be like, that's just not what I'm doing. And some writers do write allegorical things or things that are really keyed into current events.
He mentioned George Orwell as an example, like Animal Farm being about communism and Soviet Union stuff, which obviously is the case.
Totally. So I think it really depends on the person. And I think, to me, one of the things that is slightly a shame with people who got really upset with the Martin Hugo controversy. So he hosted in 2020, which was the one year that it was digital. Yeah. Oof. Like that is just a cursed year to be hosting it, no matter how you slice it.
To be alive, really. It was a rough year for a lot of us.
Yeah. So that was, in general, I think, kind of a cursed year to be handling it. Because a lot of the controversy things, like he mispronounced a lot of people's names and people got really, really mad about it. And then it came out that like they never even gave him a pronunciation guide. So like how much of it is his fault and how much of it is the con's fault was a big question. But yeah, I think, you're right that there are kind of old and newer guards, I guess. I think that's a fair thing to say. And one thing that I saw, I think on social media, so Joe Abercrombie was at this convention, did not run into Joe Abercrombie, but a lot of people did. And he basically talked about how, to him, it felt like this was a slightly younger crowd than usual for Worldcon, which is he thought was, a good statement on like the health of those communities, that there's a lot of new blood coming in versus just like the same group of older people who've been going for decades type thing. So that is all really cool. And I do think it's kind of natural when you have a lot of younger, very conscientious people coming in who want to talk about these broader issues versus people who want to reminisce. And maybe some of the things they're reminiscing about, some of those people have since become pretty problematic in the lens of history. There's a reason that the John W. Campbell Award has been renamed the Astounding Award. And a lot of that is because John W. Campbell had some pretty problematic views, is my understanding. But also left a pretty big mark on early science fiction. So how do you toe that line? So yeah, I can very much understand why he's saying this. And I think, not everyone needs to be standing on a soap. Like there's room for both. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree.
It's good to know what you're doing. And, he's in his 70s, so he knows very, very well which type of fantasy he wants to write. And it's not necessarily allegorical.
I also think there is something to the idea that writing something without intending it to give a message can give it anyway. I think about how
Sure.
Game
Oh,
of
sure.
Thrones was picked up by like every single political pundit in the world who were analogizing it to like take your pick
Yes.
to everything. I don't
Yeah.
think he meant that. I think it does happen whether you want it to or not. I think there is an element that gets out of your control.
Very
But
much.
keeping with this, because this interview is really good, by the way, if you want to see it,
Yeah.
the Oxford Writers House, he touches on quite a lot of this stuff, on the notion today that people are more out there and in front with the social commentary in their sci-fi and fantasy. For example, he's talking about one thing that bugged him,
Mm.
is not necessarily bugs him, but something he's noticed
Yeah.
is that when people adapt books today into TVs or movies, or just re-release books, there is, as he called it, a obligation to look at, like we said, outdated attitudes that the writers may have had in the past, whether it be racism, sexism, classism, etc., and then kind of adjust it for modern audiences. And I think there's a lot of examples of that. One of the more simple examples he used was Roald Dahl. We all know Roald Dahl, right?
Yeah.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, The Witches, all of these kind of classic children's books. And I forgot about this, that they'd re-released some of his books, Penguin, I believe, Puffin Books, an imprint of Penguin,
Mm-hmm.
and they changed certain words, like they got rid of the word fat and replaced it with the word enormous, which George R.R. Martin, as someone who struggled with his weight, says does not think it's very much of an improvement.
Pretty fair, I think. It's a pretty fair
so.
statement.
So there is, and I think that kind of reflects the bigger tension. And again, like you said, there is a changing of the guard, might be putting it too much. There was a bit of a younger crowd. Change happens. Like generations come in, generations come out, things do change, and that's fine. I guess I do see in Martin, and a lot of people, he's hardly alone, someone who looks at maybe the way some people treat adaptations, treat classic works of literature. Do you think, and everyone out there think, it's better to edit the old problematic texts of writers like Roald Dahl, who's a mild example, or John Campbell, a more extreme example, to make them palatable? Or do you think it's better to put them in context? Like I think Martin in this interview was saying, what you should do is leave it the way Dahl wrote it and just put a, disclaimer. This book was written in 1952 and reflects the attitudes of that time, and that should do it. Do we have a responsibility, Daniel, to preserve old, important, influential texts that may be problematic, or should we change them to keep them more in line with modern sensibilities? What a philosophical question.
Yeah. Oh, we're going deep on this pod. All right. It's nice to be back. Yeah, I think
and we'll have more fun right this, I swear to God, people. Sorry.
There are two sides to this, right? Because you started talking about adaptations, and I think when it comes to adapting works that were maybe problematic in their time, I think that's a different issue where like there is a kind of an onus to modernize a little bit, because then you're getting into, talks about representation in the film industry and all of that kind of stuff. Like that's a bigger question, I think, in terms of adaptation. In terms of editing books that have been out to make them more palatable, I kind of fully agree with Martin on this. I don't think that's less so even than like, do we have a responsibility to preserve Roald Dahl's words? Which maybe we do. I think it also does a disservice to readers by assuming they couldn't handle how it was written, even with the note of this is what it meant in context for the time. I think that kind of does a disservice to readers in terms of, could you not handle the critical thinking necessary to understand that this was written maybe by a problematic individual, maybe in a different time with different social norms, and look at how much things have changed and how far they've come. I don't think going back and editing something like a Roald Dahl book to make it more like that doesn't. I remember that bothered me when I first heard about it, just because it's kind of like it's like why use the resources to change a text like this to the cynical part of this is because publishers want to keep selling those books and think they'll be
to children.
To children, which that's when it's a children's author, that's a whole different
right.
That really does change the conversation a little in terms of how is it impacting children to read these things. But at the same time, like, I had, so on a personal note, growing up, I had like no reading censorship. I could really read whatever I wanted. My dad was just happy I was reading at all. And it worked out really well for me. So I do think there's a tendency to
look at all your books.
Yes, look at all these books that I definitely own and are not the property of the public library near me. I think in general, censoring things for children, it does get into this naughty territory of, are you doing them a favor or are you coddling them in a way that is maybe not going to be good for anyone? And this is sadly a very pressing topic in the United States at the moment because of book banning and all that kind of stuff. So I agree with Martin on this one. What about you, Dan?
I do, especially with this, whether it's a benign example like Dahl, where I don't think anybody is going to be that offended, even by his original texts, even if they are for kids, knowing that, like, think of the children is often a bit of a Trojan horse for people to get in some unsavory ideas. Like, think of the children is why people are arguing that, like, there shouldn't be gay teachers, that kind of thing, which is obviously kind of a subterfuge way of getting some unsavory conservative ideas into public discourse. What about someone like who's more controversial though, like an H.P. Lovecraft, who is like an out-and-out white supremacist, but his things are for adults. Like, they're not for kids. I think that would be equally silly to change it. I'm okay with a qualifying thing, like a disclaimer. I think that's fine. Like, this is the context where this person wrote this stuff. This is what it means. Although in that case, I guess his stories aren't. They're all like the racism is coded. It's all like the fish people.
Pretty hard to take it out
for it, etc.
Yeah, pretty hard to take the racism out of the H.P. Lovecraft, I think.
It doesn't mean it's not something interesting to read, though, that you can't read it and appreciate what it's doing or learn from it or be interested in it. I think you should definitely know the context in the world, but I don't know about changing things or banning things like that. I just don't think it adds to the good. And I'm all for a younger generation, mostly younger, anybody who's pushing the conversation forward in a different way.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think for kids, it is a naughtier discussion because how you're influencing them with, outdated ideas or things like that. It's just a more complicated topic. For adult books like Lovecraft, fully leave them alone. Like, you can just choose not to read them. Like, if it is important to you to understand the context, then you can't understand the context if it has been edited, because it will change the work and change how you analyze it. I think it's always interesting with the whole like separating the art and the artist conversation. Like, I don't think I'll ever read Harry Potter again. Nice, she hasn't been tweeting for a while since she's now under legal duress. Yeah. But at certain points, I think if something is going to be egregious enough that you can't separate it, you're just naturally going to move away from it. And that is kind of the way that should be. I don't know what it's going to be like to read Neil Gaiman books now. So if those of you who don't know, Neil Gaiman is facing sexual abuse allegations right now from multiple women over years and years. Marion Zimmer Bradley, after I found out the stuff about her, I just can't read her books anymore because there's a lot of sexual weirdness in the books. It's impossible to read them and not, once you know about her life, not see the stuff. But yeah, getting off in the weeds, but generally I agree with you and with Martin on this. And I think reading encourages critical thinking, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, good point. Okay, let's take a fun break here. Some heavy stuff.
We do have fun
comments.
Stuff.
Sometimes. Andrew, congrats you on your George R. Martin interview, Daniel. That's really
Thank you,
cool.
Andrew.
I agree. Great discussion in there between Julie and Robert and Martha about other stuff. You guys are, as always, on top of the stuff.
Yeah.
Ooh, and Fantasy Fans we do another hype show list for other shows coming this fall. Not a terrible
idea. Yeah.
Let's go on because there are a couple other comments from Martin I want to hit though that are not as intense and horrid, although still kind of spicy. Just in Winds of Winter, Julie mentioned he's never going to finish the Winds of Winter. I mean, who knows? I think he will. The comment from this interview that kind of made waves was a little pithy, Twitter-ready response when he was asked, if there's one thing about your book, what could you change? He says, if I could change one thing about my books, I'd have them finished. To great applause and titters and laughter, which is true. Not much to say about it, really. He just, that's the case. He did go on an interesting tangent about an author named Gene Wolfe, who wrote this quadrilogy, is that the word? Of books called The Book of the Sun. And he said Gene Wolfe had a full-time job. He wrote these on his side, and he didn't release the quadrilogy until all 4 books were finished, which meant that he could go back to earlier books and edit what didn't make sense anymore as it went on. And I wonder if, because Martin talked about it in the context of a question about the Winds of Winter, which the undertone there is always, why isn't it finished after a million years? I wonder if, I mean, I don't wonder, I've always thought this, that a big part of the reason he's having trouble finishing it or going forward is because he feels obligated to not retcon things to make sure everything is consistent with everything that came before. And there's so much that came before that just involves a lot of doing. And he wishes, like, this would be easier if I could go back and just remove that section from A Clash of Kings that makes it difficult to do what I would otherwise want to do in the Winds of Winter, was kind of my read on that.
Yeah. So that's an interesting read. And I do think, there's something to finishing a series and being able to tweak it. I can see why he would say that. And I think part of that too is then he wouldn't need to worry about the damn thing while Game of Thrones was on and all of that.
Yeah, of course.
I will just say, I mean, he's working on it. That is the impression that
Obviously,
I got. We did not talk about the Winds of Winter. I will just put that out there now.
Don't say that.
Okay, fair. We may or may not have talked about it. And if you watch this show, you might know which way that falls. But my impression is he is still very much working on it. And
of course,
there's just a lot of pressure. Like, if you think about it, there has probably never been another living author in quite this situation that George R.R. Martin has been in, where he's been writing these books. He's never been fast with them. The first 3 came out relatively quick, but after that, they were taking years between anyway. And then this whole show came out. The ending was really poorly received, and he's late enough in his career that it is, he's looking at this as the work he will be remembered for.
Yeah.
And
money's not a problem anymore, so he doesn't need to worry about that.
That is a straight up thing he said, like, about when I talked to him, in terms of, like, he doesn't need to write another word in his life, but he does because he is driven to do it and he loves doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, the pithy response is fair. I could totally see how, of course, if you could go back in time and change one thing, well, yeah, I'd have them all done and not have this thing that's been stressing me out for a decade that I have to think about. Yeah, I am still hopeful. I will remain hopeful forever because he's doing his best, and that is what it is.
Yeah. And maybe we'll find out more about that in your interview, or maybe not. Stay tuned. And finally, I want to hit this last thing he said about adaptations, because a couple months ago, he wrote a blog post basically saying that he wishes people were more faithful to the book. And this does kind of hit differently after watching the House of the Dragon finale, which changed the book in some pretty big ways that I didn't personally enjoy, but that's just me. He said that there's not enough faithful adaptation. Studios don't buy the book that did terribly and no one liked. They buy classics. They buy books that are centuries old and that people loved, or they buy the latest bestseller that has hundreds of fans. And then they turn it over to a screenwriter and director who often come up with their own ideas. Even if they're adapting Dickens or Tolkien or Shakespeare or whoever, they decide to make it their own. But they never make it better because usually the people who are making it their own are simply not as good as the people who wrote it in the first place. I can't read that and not think about Allison and Rhaenyra getting buddy-buddy and working together at the end of House of the Dragon, which is completely opposed to what happens in the book. And I have no idea if he means it that way. Don't you want to be a fly in the room when Ryan Condal or Sarah Hess reads that, though? I do, personally. And I think that we can all... I mean, the book was better than the movie is a classic saying, as old as dirt, or as old as movies anyway. So, you know, as old as 1920-ish. Basically, I agree. I've basically given up that The Rings of Power, for instance, is going to adapt Tolkien's work in a way that's going to make me think this really came from J.R.R. Tolkien's soul. And I think he's funny about it. I think it's more or less true. I think that there have been adaptations that really improved on things that I liked a lot.
Sure.
Generally speaking, I do wish they would stick closer. And I don't know why they don't. With a book like Fire and Blood that's so good and so full of drama and twists and turns, part of me just doesn't know why it's not enough, why there has to be kind of a subversion of a book that's already subversive. But so I'm vibing with this.
Yeah, I am vibing with this too. I will not. So whether this is about House of the Dragon or not, which I don't think
probably
it
is
is.
Not. Yeah, it probably
is not. But I think there are enough examples of this in adaptations that it doesn't really matter if it is or not, because it is broadly applicable. And I'll be honest, I multiple times throughout this season, I did have the thought of one of the issues with this show is that these writers just are not George R.R. Martin, which like they're doing some things that are really good that Martin didn't do. Fair.
Oh, yes, true.
But I think there are also moments where I'm like, he just would never have done this kind of harebrained thing. Like, that's just not the sort of thing he would write. And, you know, thinking about The Witcher and The Witcher those books had their own issues in the first place.
Sure.
But it's very obvious with some of the changes that it's like, they thought these would be cute in a Hollywood sort of way. And it just isn't the same spirit of the thing that the author wrote. And so I do think he has a really fair point here in terms of let's get a book and make it our own. And I think there are, the proof is in the pudding that there are just way more examples of that going awry and being terrible than there are examples of it going really, really well. Those examples of it going really, really well are great, but they're few and far between. So I personally agree with this too.
And there you go.
Yeah.
We don't need to say much more about it. I guess I do hope. I hope for some, like, I don't know to name names and like drop examples, but maybe in a future interview.
Well,
all right.
There's one. I want to give
course.
one tease from my time in Scotland that I can't talk details about because it was a lot of. I did have a lot of like off the record conversations when I was there, so I can't get into the details of those. But I did also want to say, for people who maybe had feelings about House of the Dragon or stuff like that, I left that trip feeling very optimistic about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Really?
Yes. So I'm curious to hear when people talk about it more. I am more confident after going on that trip that it's probably going to be good.
Okay, you can't say the details. You can tell me later, right?
Yeah, of course I can tell you.
Okay, cool.
But
I'm curious.
Yeah, just a general sense of optimism. I think that's what I would say about that. So
how intriguing.
Yeah.
What great exclusive content and teases you get here on Take the Black podcast every week at Wednesday, 2 p.m. CST. Finally, Daniel, let's move on because we're talking a lot. We're having a good time. Glad to have you back.
As always, it's great to be back.
Yeah. Onto the what are we watching or reading section. And somebody asked earlier about Alien Romulus. Daniel, you saw that. What'd you think?
I did. I really enjoyed it. Do we talk spoilers? Do we talk not spoilers? I really enjoyed it, but I had one issue, which is pretty much in line with Natalie Zamora wrote a review of this that's up on winteriscoming.net. And I fully agree with her one issue she had with the movie, which is through some digital and practical necromancy, they brought back a certain character or a certain likeness, we'll say, from a previous Alien movie that just really did not sit well with me and felt just unnecessary. Like they could have very easily just had a new actor and it would have been fine. Like it really wouldn't have changed very much. So aside from that, I loved Alien Romulus. That was really my one qualm.
Is the necromanced actor like around for the entire movie, or is it like a scene or something?
It is a central part of the movie. So
really?
it is a central part of the movie. And it is, I read some of the behind the scenes stuff about why they made the decision to use that person's likeness. And it is a little bit better. They had like the person's family was very supportive of it. They thought that person would have been very supportive of it, but it's still a person who has died, still being brought back to work in Hollywood. And it is a very central part of the movie. And at a certain point, it's like, you could have just cast someone new, because the overriding thing is it distracted me. Every time it was on screen, I thought about that and how do I feel about this instead of what was going on in the movie. And the movie was great. So that's just like, it was just unnecessary. It was an unnecessary distraction to me. But that aside, I will be seeing it a second time because I did really enjoy it. Do you think you're going to check it out?
Probably not. I've seen Alien. I've never seen Aliens. I'll start with that one. And then maybe I'll consider other Alien things in the future. Some good comments here. I do kind of agree with Fantasy Fan that Night of the Seven Kingdoms being 6 episodes could be a bit of an issue because it's not the longest story.
Yeah.
I do agree that, like, if this weren't the time of post-peak TV, it probably would have been a movie. But we're in the time of post-peak TV. Things are TV shows. I think they can totally pull that off if they're conscientious about it and know what they're doing. I don't see a problem.
Same.
But I do think that if George R.R. Martin's work had caught on in a big way in like the 2000s, not the 2010s, we probably would have another Seven Kingdom movie, not a TV show.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's based on a novella, so how much they'll pad it out is definitely a question that I think, is on my mind, and I think is a pretty fair one to ask, that it's 6 episodes. What is that going to look like? Because it's only 180-ish page book, I think. It's pretty short. But we'll see. Because, DDF Star said, House of the Dragon is a bad adaptation. I hope Dunk and Egg is better since it's my favorite prequel story. And I enjoy House of the Dragon, but I think as an adaptation, that's kind of fair. Like they've changed so much at this point. Yeah. I hope that Dunk and Egg is a little more faithful because it's also a simpler story, right? Like you don't need. I mean, they didn't need to make lots of changes for House of the Dragon, but it's easier to understand. If they change Dunk and Egg willy-nilly, it's like, what are we even doing here? So,
I mean, I will say, I don't think House of the Dragon has suffered, at least didn't need ever to suffer from feeling stretched out. Like there's plenty of material, even though it's not many pages, that you can get a lot out of it.
Agreed.
So you can do wonders with things.
Yeah.
All right. I will say one thing that I tried watching, I'm not anywhere close to done yet, but the HBO show, it's been around for a long time. Kit Harington just joined it this season, is Industry.
Oh, cool.
I think folk are sleeping on this one. I just watched the pilot. Natalie tells me it's really good. I'm probably going to keep watching this show, kind of like Succession meets Euphoria, about these young financial graduates who are trying to land a full-time job in a big investment banking firm in London. And all about the high finance industry, but also with young, sexy escapades.
Of course.
It was really strong. It was good. It was
cool.
I've heard little about this show, but it definitely has that HBO kind of bracing relentlessness to it that I really enjoy. So I'll keep watching that. And I hear it just gets better and better as it goes along. And this is kind of a make or break year for the show. It took House of the Dragon's old time slot.
Yeah.
And apparently is doing much better. So I like an original show getting some attention and having success. So I hope it has success. And I know that we've both gotten screeners for the Rings of Power, but
Yes.
I don't think the embargo is up yet. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, I think
We,
so.
I have not watched them yet. I'm going to start tonight.
Nice. Yeah, same. I'm excited to get into the Rings of Power. I can't believe it's already here. I have this like I part of me is wondering like, is this season going to be really good? Are they going to turn around and upset? And then I remember Tom Bombadil is in it and parting serious wisdom, and I get uncertain all over again.
You
But
want to
yeah,
know what really turned me lately? What I was like, that's what you're doing?
What?
It could be great. Amazon, we love you. Lord of the
It
Rings,
could
we're
be
big
great.
fans. We have to do it. We have to have disclaimers. So I've been wondering for a while. So the first season of Rings of Power was Sauron was disguised himself as some dude named Halbrand, not in the book,
Yes.
whatever, past it. He tricks Galadriel into kind of working with him, and then in the end, she finds out his dastardly plan.
There's some
And I've
mild
been
pining.
wondering, what's that?
I said there's some mild pining.
Some mild pining, of course. And I've been wondering, he comes back in the new season as kind of the actual book character, Anatar, with like elven ears and a little blonde wig.
Yes.
And I've been asking, like, how are people fooled by this? Like, it's the same actor, just in a wig. Like, how are they going to explain that? And this is out there in an interview from Morfydd Clark, who plays Galadriel. It came out that she just doesn't tell anybody. She's too embarrassed. So she just doesn't tell anybody that Sauron infiltrated them. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Well,
from a writing standpoint.
That's how they left off the first season was her, the rings were forged. She hadn't told anyone. So I believe that, but I agree with you. I don't love that as a thing for Galadriel as a character, that she's too embarrassed to tell everyone she brought Sauron into their midst when her whole purpose has been hunting Sauron.
I'm sure you're familiar with the idiot plot idea.
No, enlighten me.
I think it's a Roger Ebert creation of a plot that only works because a lot of the characters are complete morons or act like total idiots. That kind of gave me a little bit of that. Like, the only way we can have Sauron involved like we want to is if Galadriel has to act like a total fool and not tell people this really important news. I
hope that they don't really lean into that, because they don't really need to. Like, not that many people even met Halbrand. So, like, realistically, if she's like, that guy I brought into our midst, that was Sauron, Celebrimbor will know. His handful of helpers will know, and maybe Elrond. Like, no one else even saw him, and
none of them will know.
None of them would know anyway. So I don't know that they need to do that. I hope they don't lean in too hard, because it would be you're making Galadriel stupid when you don't really need to anyway.
I'll find out tonight. And I don't want to crap it too much. Like Fancy Fan says, they're looking forward to it. It's going to be much better. I hope so too.
The last trailer got me excited. Yeah, the last trailer got me excited. I'm excited for Eregion. I am looking forward to seeing Rune, even though I'm still like, the stranger, I don't know what's going on with you. But it is cool that they're going to a different region that has never really been in any of the Tolkien adaptations before. We'll see.
I have low expectations, and I think that's a good thing. I think you can only exceed them.
Yes. Aside from that, the other thing I have been watching that I wanted to mention is Time Bandits on Apple TV Plus. That show is charming and so much fun. It is like I think it was the original movie it's based on was made by some of the people who did Monty Python.
Terry Gilliam,
Yeah, and it has that feel of a Monty Python story, except if it was being made by like Taika Waititi. So like Monty Python meets What We Do in the Shadows a little bit in terms of like the tone of the thing. It's so fun. This kid basically gets sucked through a portal in his bedroom. He meets a bunch of people who are time bandits, and they're all from different times. And Phoebe Buffay is one of them.
Lisa Kudrow. Yeah.
Lisa Kudrow is one of them. The dude who played Ubba from The Last Kingdom is another, and he's really funny. There's an actor who played a really scary character named Ned Lowe in Black Sails, and he is he was also in Vikings, and he's playing like a flamboyant actor in this. So yeah, it's a very fun show. I'm enjoying it a lot. And
nice. Lots to watch.
Yeah, lots to watch right now. It is a good time for
more
the
around the
old
corner.
television. Yeah.
Well, why don't we mark your return to Take the Black with a installment of the Wick News Lightning Round, where we go through a bunch of stories we couldn't get to in the main body of the show and give our 20-second opinions. Ready to dust off the old Wick News Lightning Rod and get back into this, Daniel?
Damn right I am. Let's make some lightning.
All right. I'll go ahead and ask you first. Okay. Why not? No arrangement as usual.
Wait. Let me ask you first.
Out. What's that?
Okay, never mind. We'll go. Word came out.
Okay. Word came out that Temuera Morrison, who plays the character of Boba Fett in the Star Wars franchise, is not going to be in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, despite being in their series and them being in his series. Likely because reception to his Book of Boba Fett show wasn't that great.
I think this is idiotic and I hate it. Look, Boba Fett
Which part?
All of it. Boba Fett is a beloved Star Wars character. If Disney is getting cold feet on Boba Fett, it's because they've mishandled Boba Fett. It's not the damn character's fault. Like, you can't ice Boba Fett because they've made bad decisions overall with the franchise. That just reeks of mouse-flavored cowardice to me. No, I'll... Sure. Let's swap these next two. Mainly, I wanted to get your opinion on this other one because you are the poster child, biggest fan who convinces everyone they should watch it.
I don't want that label.
Too bad. No. So, Interview with the Vampire season 1, and also a bunch of other AMC shows we don't care about. Interview with the Vampire. The first season is now on Netflix. Should we watch it?
Yes, you should. Okay, fine. I'll accept the label. This is an adaptation done wonderfully. This book is from the 70s, and they adapt the heart of it, and it's still pretty accurate. It's marked in the movie, but they updated a ton, new kinds of casting, new setting, location, but it's all done brilliantly. Watch it. Good. That's the thing to follow. That's the kind of adaptation you want. What a good show.
Nice. Whew, that was a good sell.
Daniel, Star Wars The Acolyte, back to Star Wars, is canceled. It will not return for season 2.
Mouse stinking cowardice. I hate it. And I didn't even love The Acolyte. Like, I thought it was an okay show. I thought it had some really good episodes and some very not good episodes. I thought the pacing was bad. But it's ended off well enough and did enough original things that I think it deserved a second season. For them to cancel it after barely a month after they just paraded Manny Jacinto around at D23 being like, look how great The Acolyte is. Just, man, Disney, what are we doing here? Sorry, that was longer than 20 seconds. Don't pillory me. I'm just now back. Okay. So Caitlin Dever has come out that she has extra security on set for The Last of Us because people hate her character Abby so much.
Yeah, The Last of Us season 2, about done filming. Character Abby, very, very hated in the video game community.
Yes.
Can they play extra security? I'm sure that who on the set is trying to like throw eggs at the lady who plays Abby? I believe it because it's being told to me, but also I'm kind of giving, that's really happening. That sounds suspicious. But if it is, it's crazy and insane and shouldn't be happening.
Don't throw eggs at Abby. The saddest thing about all this is that Abby is a great character.
Well, of course, yeah. She's the reason for the season in that game.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Daniel, noted author and businessman extraordinaire Brandon Sanderson, writer of the Mistborn series and the Stromad Archive series, has broken another Kickstarter record, as he is wont to do, raising $5 million in a day for a new Cosmere, that's his shared universe of his series, tabletop RPG. It since raised a lot more, but the $5 million a day was the record.
Yeah. Is anyone surprised at Brandon Sanderson breaking records for making money? We shouldn't be at this point. Yeah. So he has a new tabletop RPG that's coming out. It was originally billed as a Stormlight Archive RPG, and it's since come out that it is the entire Cosmere, so we'll have different worlds. You can play as different types of characters from his various different books. Should be really interesting, and you will definitely need a very, very thick encyclopedia of terms and shit to play it.
Nice.
Okay. Dan, so The Boys is on top of the streaming charts for the first time ever for its season 4 finale. Yay.
I think it's great. The Boys has always been a really, I've always said, it's a rock solid, consistent show. It doesn't really have many dips. I think this season hit some new highs, especially those finales were quite good. I know it got some blowback. I didn't understand it. I think my prediction is season 5 is going to be close to a pop culture phenomenon. I think they've earned it. I think they've built up slowly. I think they're going to have a huge final season. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Daniel, the Witcher author, Andrzej Sapkowski, has finished a new Witcher book all about Geralt of Rivia, possibly throughout this winter. No title known as of this time.
Yeah, it's always cool when there's a new Witcher book. And, you know, Sapkowski at this point, he said he was done, but then he started making boatloads of sweet, sweet cash, so now he's not done. This is another standalone book, I think. It's not a sequel to the Witcher saga. Similar to Season of Storms, a separate book about Geralt's. I think it is out internationally, maybe in Poland this winter. I think we're expecting the US release at the beginning of 2025. Gotcha. Don't quote me on that, though.
That's still winter, maybe?
Actually, it is still winter. So. Winter 2025. Mm-hmm. All right. This last one, this is exciting news. Katie Sagal joins One Piece Season 2 after Jamie Lee Curtis passed on the role of Dr. Kureha for scheduling reasons.
Yeah. I don't know One Piece terribly well. I never read the manga or anything, but I liked the Netflix show. I thought it was really fun. Yeah. And it's getting attention. Like Jamie Lee Curtis Oscar was going to play this part because apparently she looks like a character from the manga. She backed out. But Katie Sagal, Leela from Futurama, Sons of Anarchy, Peggy Bundy from Married with Children is in instead. I'll watch that. I was already going to watch that. Now I'll watch it even harder.
Nice.
Cool. And that is our show. We are here every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, or 3 on the East Coast. And I always like to do this, 1 in the mountains and noon on the West Coast. We talk about all things sci-fi, fantasy, movies, TV, books, all that good stuff. Also, if you don't want to catch us live or can't catch us live because of an appendectomy, feel free to download us in podcast form wherever podcasts are available, be it Google Play, YouTube Music, or wherever. Daniel, we're glad to have you back. Everybody, we're glad that you're here. Oh, Leo, I watched the Kite Man show too. I have a weakness for those DC animated shows. I always have, and it's cute. And I probably will continue to watch it. And come back to see us. Thank you, Martha. And remember, Daniel interviewed George R.R. Martin, and we're gonna roll that shit out sooner or later.
It's true. Take care, all. Great to see you.